A summer camp meant to be filled with laughter, friendship, and adventure instead became the site of one of the most disturbing and heartbreaking crimes in American history. This is the story of the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. In June of 1977, 3 young Girl Scouts, 8-year-old Lori Farmer, 9-year-old Michele Guse, and 10-year-old Doris Milner, were preparing for a 2-week summer camp at Camp Scott, located near the quiet town of Locust Grove, Oklahoma. The camp was nestled deep in the woods, covering over 400 acres of dense forest and peaceful creeks. For nearly 50 years, it had been a place where girls learned camping skills, made lifelong friendships, and created cherished memories. But none of the girls knew about the troubling events that had been quietly unfolding in the months leading up to this summer. Doris Milner was having second thoughts. Her 2 best friends weren't going, and the idea of being away from home for 2 weeks without them made her feel anxious. Her mother tried to reassure her, promising that if she got too homesick, she'd come to pick her up. At the Girl Scout headquarters, a counselor named Michelle Hoffman noticed Doris looking nervous. Wanting to help, she invited Doris to sit next to her on the bus ride to Camp Scott. Doris accepted. And as the bus rolled toward the camp, Doris slowly began to relax, joining in the cheerful camp songs. The camp was divided into several units, each named after Native American tribes. The girls slept in tents raised on wooden platforms with canvas sides. Each tent could hold 4 campers. Doris was assigned to Tent 8, alongside Michele Guse and Lori Farmer. There was meant to be a 4th camper, Kristen Chenoweth, but fate intervened. Kristen fell ill and couldn't attend. That one twist of fate may have saved her life. As night fell on June 12, 1977, the sky darkened and rain poured down, turning into a heavy thunderstorm. Tent 8 was pitched farthest from the counselor's tent and partially hidden behind the shower block. Isolated and vulnerable, counselors, including Michelle, made their rounds to check on the girls. All seemed peaceful. The 3 young campers in Tent 8 had already drifted off to sleep. But unknown to the campers, Camp Scott had a troubling recent history. In the months before, counselors heard strange noises in the woods, sounds no wild animal would make. A male counselor returned one night to find his tent slashed open. Items and food frequently disappeared. The most disturbing incident occurred just weeks before camp started. A box of donuts was stolen, and inside was a terrifying note. Scribbled repeatedly were the words, "Kill, kill, kill," followed by a chilling message, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1. The camp dismissed it as a prank. As the storm raged, strange sounds echoed through the camp. Around 1:30 a.m., Counselor Carla Wilhite woke to low groaning noises nearby. She investigated but found nothing. Some girls reported seeing a man with a flashlight walking among the tents. When they shined their lights at him, he turned and walked away, without saying a word. Shortly after, campers heard distant screaming, and a young girl's desperate voice crying out, "Mama, Mama, Mama." But the counselors never heard it. At dawn, Carla headed to the showers. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted something that made her heart stop. A sleeping bag was lying on the ground, outside the tents. And on top was the body of Doris Milner. She had been brutally beaten and strangled. As the counselors searched in panic, they found Tent 8 smeared with blood and empty. The bodies of Michele Guse and Lori Farmer were soon discovered stuffed inside their sleeping bags along a trail leading to the showers. All 3 had been sexually assaulted and murdered. The camp was shut down that very day. Camp Scott would never reopen. Investigators uncovered key evidence. A bloody shoe print, men's size 9.5. A red flashlight left behind, with newspaper padding inside to prevent battery rattling. A rope. Duct tape. A pair of women's eyeglasses. Nearby, they discovered a small cave, clearly used as a hideout. Inside were newspapers matching the ones found in the flashlight, photographs, and a taunting message scrawled on the wall: "The killer was here. Bye-bye, fools." The 17th of June, 1977. Police brought in tracking dogs from Pennsylvania. But mysteriously, both dogs died, one from heat stroke and the other after being hit by a car, fueling rumors of a curse. The focus quickly shifted to one man, Gene Leroy Hart, a Cherokee prison escapee with a history of rape and kidnapping, and the hunt for him had just begun. For months, Gene Leroy Hart evaded capture. Hundreds of volunteers scoured the area near Camp Scott. But Gene had vanished, perhaps with the help of family and friends. Nearly a year later, on April 6, 1978, police received a tip. They raided a remote shack deep in the Cookson Hills, and there, sitting calmly, was Gene Leroy Hart. He was wearing a pair of women's eyeglasses, a disturbing habit noted in his previous crimes. The sheriff was quoted saying, "I'm 1000% sure Hart is the killer." In 1979, Gene's trial gripped the entire nation. Supporters believed Gene was being railroaded due to racial prejudice. His defense attorney, Garvin Isaacs, remembered the first words Gene said to him: "I didn't kill those Girl Scouts." The prosecution had evidence: the cave items, photographs, footprints, and biological samples, but without modern DNA technology, it was all circumstantial. The shoe print didn't match Gene's size. The semen sample was inconclusive by 1979 standards. The defense even pointed the finger at another convicted rapist, William Stevens, who had suspicious injuries and connections to a missing flashlight found at the crime scene. But William had an alibi, and eventually, the focus remained solely on Gene. On March 20, 1979, the jury delivered a shocking verdict: not guilty. Gene was acquitted of the murders. But freedom was never an option. He was returned to prison to serve his 308-year sentence for previous crimes. Just months later, Gene collapsed while jogging in prison. He suffered a fatal heart attack and died at age 35. With Gene dead, the case stalled. But questions lingered. Had law enforcement focused so much on Gene that the real killer had escaped? In 1989, DNA testing suggested a possible match to Gene in 3 out of 5 samples, but it wasn't definitive. More tests in 2008 failed due to degraded samples. By 2017, a new sheriff, Mike Reed, who had been a child during the murders, took up the case. He brought the evidence to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. After reviewing every detail, the cold case board unanimously concluded Gene Leroy Hart was the killer. With community fundraising, further DNA testing was done. In 2022, the sheriff's office revealed that DNA evidence strongly suggested Hart's involvement, ruling out all other suspects, but officially, the case remains unsolved. There are still mysteries: a bloody shoe print that was 2 sizes smaller than Gene's, testimony suggesting 2 weapons were used. Was there a second killer? The Hulu documentary, Keeper of the Ashes, hosted by Kristen Chenoweth, the girl who was supposed to be in Tent 8, brought the story back into public focus. She said, "There's no closure. There's no pretty bow at the end." Even decades later, the haunting question remains: what really happened on that dark night in Tent 8? This is a case that will never be forgotten.